Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Status. It's something we want but might have difficulty admitting its presence or acknowledging we want it. Except it's pretty much always around us, and according to my guest, it's a fundamental human need. It can drive the levels to which we receive respect and how we think about ourselves. Dr. Alison Fragale is a professor at the University of North Carolina, a keynote speaker, and the author of a book I loved called Likeable Badass: How Women Can Get the Success They Deserve. I'm not alone in my love for this book. Wharton professor and author Adam Grant said the book is, quote, the ultimate guide for women to achieve their goals. So listen in as Alison and I talk about status, how it relates to women, and how it can inform us all. Dr. Alison Fragale, who has asked me to call her Alison, a hearty welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you for having me. Psyched to be here.
Oh my gosh, I loved your book, Likeable Badass. It should be required reading. I also bemoan the fact that I did not have you as a professor in college because my life trajectory would have gone so much better.
Thank you for that.
Let's get into the S word. A lot of people talk about sex, and that's no longer been taboo, but I would say your S word has actually been the thing that nobody wants to talk about, and that is status. Everybody thinks like, oh, I don't care about status as I drive off in my Lamborghini and sitting in first class. It's very easy for people who have high status to, quote, not care about it. And yet it's taboo to even discuss at all. And you just wrote an entire book about it and how women are under a double standard as it relates to status. First, talk about the S word. What are your thoughts just on the S word as a thing?
First, what status is, there's a couple different meanings of status. And the one that I focus on is central to my research and in psychology and social psychology is the concept of respect, of how much we are respected and regarded by other people. So this is the thing that we seek. And sometimes people could seek it out by acquiring status symbols, but really the fundamental thing we're looking for is the respect of our audience, that we want people to respect and value us. And when people do respect and value us, life is a lot better. So to your point that people don't talk about it, I 100% agree. Status is a fundamental human need alongside other things that we want, like power, controlling things, affiliation, having relationships, achievement, learning stuff, and status, being respected. And life is better with all those things than without. And when we lack any of those things, our physical health suffers, our mental health suffers. But of those needs, status is the least understood. It's the least thing we're able to put a label on. We all know if you have an experience where you feel like someone doesn't respect and value you, you can sense it. It feels bad. You might come home and complain about like you had a bad day, but we can't really articulate it. And that I think is a challenge because if we can't label things and we can't point at them, then we can't really like pursue them as directly as we want to. So one of the things that was a funny experience to me in writing the book about status was that the book is called Likeable Badass. It was always going to be called Likeable Badass, but the original subtitle was different. The original subtitle was supposed to be How Women Win the Status Game. And I really liked my title. I thought it was just brilliant. And my editor said, yes to Likeable Badass, no to How Women Win the Status Game. I said, that's a great title. She said, no, it's terrible. I said, why? She said, because no one really understands what status is, which is A, why you need to write the book, but B, you cannot put things on covers of books that people don't know what they are. It's a terrible way to sell books. So I deferred to her expertise in book selling, but I just thought, isn't that the truth, right? This idea that a fundamental need that we all seek and as such a contributor to our life and happiness is something we cannot label such that I cannot put it on the cover of a book. And I'm trying to change that so that when I write the next book, people say, of course I know what status is, right? Who doesn't know what status is? And we can start to talk about it because I have teenagers in middle school now. They're all in sex ed. So I say, even if you don't necessarily want to talk about your sex life, you need to know what it is. And same kind of thing. You may or may not be out there verbalizing how status is important to you, but it does matter. And if you don't understand it, then you can't pursue it very effectively. And therefore, you're not going to have as good of a life.
Absolutely agreed. And such an important topic at this moment. And this double standard through which women are judged, and men do not suffer from this. If a man sheds a tear during a presentation, he's seen as strong and courageous. If a woman does the same, she's considered fragile. And you talk about this idea that, what is lionized for men very often is the opposite for women. And it's almost as if, given the current standards, there's no way for women to win. If they're too soft, they'll be walked upon. You even talk about this idea that female Supreme Court justices are more frequently interrupted than their male counterparts by a huge margin. How do women actually win at the status game? I know it's maybe a 5-hour conversation, but it seems so fraught.
One of the questions I get a lot is, why'd you write this book for women? Because status is something all human beings care about and they all have to manage, which is 100% true. So on one hand, the rules are the same for everybody. We're not playing a different game. And goes back to why I called the book Likeable Badass. The way you get status is really the same for every human being. You get status when you convince your audience that two things are true. You care about them, or you care about people other than yourself. You're a giving, caring person, and that you're capable and good at what you do. So that if I give you a task, I can trust that it'll be done. And that those two things, when your audience believes those two things about you, you know what you're doing, and you're not a selfish jerk, you care about people other than yourself. Generally, that's the recipe. We see this in the science. That's the recipe to be respected. So in that sense, that's universal. Everybody plays by the same rules. Where the gender starts to come in as a nuance is how easy it is for people to convey those two things at the same time. And it is often easier for men to be able to show up in ways that convince their audience that they are both very capable and very caring, in part because there's status inherent in gender. And so we ascribe from the very beginning more status to being a man than to being a woman. And so what that means is when a man walks into a room, his audience, their non-conscious brains will be saying, this is a very capable, caring person. And if you believe a person is very capable and caring from the outset, then they can open their mouth and do almost anything, and confirmation bias will take over. And you'll say, see, more evidence of how capable and caring they are. But when a woman walks in, the non-conscious brain says, this is a person of lower value. And then when that person opens their mouth, confirmation bias kicks in and they say, this is a person of lower value. So either they're really sweet, but not very good at what they do, or they're good at what they do and a total bitch. And so the challenge comes with, we carry status through some of these ascribed characteristics, not just gender, but race, but sexual orientation, accent, appearance, ethnicity, lots of things that we carry with us that the world judges. And they say, this is worth more than that. And so for some people, they walk into a room and the brains of their audience have already devalued them a bit. That's the really unfortunate piece. And that's actually why I like the game analogy, because I say, look, some games have an underdog. Some games aren't fair, right? Some games, bad things happen. That doesn't mean you can't be successful. And so where I really want to pivot the conversation when I talk to women is to say, there's things you don't control, and some of those things don't advantage you. That does not mean on a whole, you cannot be highly respected. We obviously know that you can be. Why? Because look around the world. Everyone can think of women in their life, most of whom are not famous, who are very well respected. They're seen as very capable and they're seen as very caring. And they are influential and people listen when they speak. And that's 100% possible. But it means that when you are the underdog, you need good strategy. You can't simply show up and rely on your innate talent or your innate advantage. You have to be able to play smart. So what I help people do is say playing smart, because what we know from status is it affected by some things you don't control, like your gender? Yes, but it's affected even more by how you show up. And so that's kind of why it feels so unfair for women, is that constantly we are in situations where we get caught by surprise, where we think, I'm good at what I do and I care about other people, but my audience isn't quite recognizing that. And therefore, I'm not getting the respect that an identical person, man doing the same thing or less next to me is getting. Why is that? It's a head scratching thing. So I try to demystify it and then very quickly pivot to, well, what can you do about it? And the fortunate answer, the thing that gives me hope as a woman and as a person who advises women, is the answer is a lot. You can do a lot.
There is a lot within our control. And there was an interesting synchronicity. I was listening to your book, and one of the things that my wife said to me on the way to a speaking engagement, I was speaking in San Francisco about my book to a really nice group. And she said, honey, when people compliment your book, you default to, oh my God, oh really? And I know you're being genuine, but it somehow diminishes the interaction. Your power somehow seems less than. Maybe just go something like, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. And you basically said the same thing in the book. There are certain rules that convey power and that are within our control. And there are things that are not within our control. If we go to a perhaps misogynistic place and a woman gets on stage, no matter how brilliant she is, the odds are against her. She may still win them over, but it will be something historic and incredible from where I sit if their biases are so misogynistic. And I love the fact that you describe there are, tons of women throughout the planet who crush it. And I'm guessing that everybody's formula is a little different. They lean into what they've got. How have you found yours?
One, on the self-deprecating, I'm right there with you. I'm a lifelong recovering self-deprecator. I still do it. One of the things that was really interesting in writing the book was I already knew I self-deprecated. I knew it was bad. I thought I had moved past a lot of it. And when I submitted the first full draft of the book to my editor, the number one piece of feedback that came back was, oh my God, you cannot be so self-deprecating in this book, including the dedication that I thought was really cute. She's like, that's terrible. You're cutting yourself down on the second page of the book. It's got to go. Then we got to a place and I could see it more through that feedback of how much I did it. So yes, I've had to learn this notion of wanting to cut yourself down is part one, to be funny. We talked about, you and I are talking offline about humor, but also to make people feel at ease, to not say like, oh, you're complimenting me and you're saying that I've done something really great, but I don't want to be seen as better than you, or I don't want you to think I think I'm better than you. And so I'm going to cut myself down. So we're the same. It's all this stuff. It's completely unproductive. But I understand those tendencies. So how have I found my way? One is just because I have expertise in human behavior and I teach these things and speak on them for a living does not mean that I was born with necessarily a better set of habits than any other human being. Like I am a serial apologizer. I use self-deprecation as a humor tactic. And I've come to understand through the science that I teach and I do that some of these things aren't productive and I move toward it. But it starts with paying attention to your own behavior. So one of the things that I'm a really big proponent of is you can't decide if you want to keep or ditch something till you know what it is. And on a lot of these behaviors, like, would you have been aware of it if your wife didn't point it out? And, when I ask people, how many cups of coffee did you have yesterday? Most people could give me within a cup an accurate answer. But if I say, how many times did you deflect a compliment or cut yourself down? People are like, I don't know. You're doing it or not doing it, but you have no idea. So step one, I think, and this is where the language of knowing what it is and status and turning your attention toward it is you can first start to observe, am I doing it or am I not? Okay, I had a moment there. I just, I cut myself down. Okay, no big deal. I can move past it, but I can at least notice it. And I've noticed a couple of things. One, for example, like things I've gotten more comfortable with. I've gotten more comfortable with the talking about my accomplishments in a way that I was not for a very, very long time, and to my detriment. So, I'm an academic. I speak for a living. When I started, I've been a professor for 20 years. When I started, I was younger than most of the people I talk to. I get less young by the day, so it's evening out. But even my MBA students, my executives I talked to, I was younger than all of them. And then I would do things like I wouldn't get on stage and I wouldn't say I had a PhD. I wouldn't say, I went to Stanford, worked at McKinsey. I wouldn't say like quick things that could be instant credibility boosters if you have 10 seconds to introduce yourself on a stage, because I just didn't like saying those things. And sometimes then I would find that I was able to command control of the room through other things like my knowledge of psychology, my ability to react and answer questions in a thoughtful way. But I would just as often have audiences who were like, I don't really know, like the feedback was kind of middling, like, is she good at what she does? And I started to find I might need to, because I'm young and I'm female and I've got 10 seconds to convince you that I'm a person that knows what I'm talking about. I might need to get more comfortable introducing myself by adding in credentials that I don't really like to say, but that might be something that I have to do because of the environment that I'm in and what you might be perceiving about me if I don't correct your perceptions. And I got a little more comfortable with that kind of stuff. So on the book, when we weren't going to call the book How Women Win the Status Game, the editors wanted to put 17 words in a title that could only be 5 words long. They were like, we need to get science and we need to get women and we need to get success. they were really big on science because I have this edgy title, and they didn't want the edgy title to unintentionally convey that this was some kind of like reality star book or something, that there was actually substantive behavioral science in it. So they wanted to get science in there. And as we went round and round with titles, we could not squish science in there in a way that sounded good. And I finally said, hey, wait a second. I have an aversion to being referred to as doctor or to ever using the letters PhD behind my name. In 20 years, I've never done it. Sometimes people do it, against my wishes, but I never do it. But I'm like, what if I put my PhD behind my name? Because that might be a way to signal science to the world without using the word science. And I'm like, I don't really love it, but if that's important, then that might do it. And then they came back and they said, we did a check for academics, psychologists, who puts PhD on their books and who doesn't. And they gave me a list of well-known authors, male and female. And guess what? None of the men have PhD on their book and all of the women do. And I said, well, guess which category I belong in? I said, there's probably a reason all those successful women have PhD on their book is because no one would assume that they had it unless they put it on there. And so I was like, on it goes. So my point is, in that long story, is that sometimes I've become comfortable doing things that I don't really love, but they're not inauthentic. I do have a PhD. It's not misrepresenting myself. It's just not typically how I refer to myself. But in a situation where I've got to convince somebody in an airport bookstore, this might actually teach you something. Okay, well, maybe those 3 letters are a way to do it. And I've had to evolve into getting comfortable with those things because they weren't really my natural style. My style was always to like hide that stuff and be modest and not talk about those things. And I've gotten more comfortable as I've gotten more informed about how to manage both those dimensions.
It's interesting. One of the things I heard kind of parenthetically corroborated in your book is something that Martin Seligman talks about out of the University of Pennsylvania when he was describing the 24 very well validated virtues and values in action that he and a team of social scientists were able to uncover through a really massive effort. One of them was humility. And he said, of the 24, it's the only one that doesn't yield happiness. And I find this struggle, this internal wrestling of I'm going to give everything I have to get a PhD from Stanford in your case, which is an impossible thing to do. And yet you did it. You climbed to the summit of Mount Everest, and yet you don't want to tell anyone. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of want to talk about that paradox of the effort and the desire to conceal that. And I can't imagine in any world that it was meant to just be locked up in a box so no one could see it. And yet there's this ick factor maybe of sharing it with the world. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, there's science to it. And there's science that shows why it's such a bad idea, which is how I've gotten comfortable with doing this. So the science of it is that humility is a form of warmth. So how do we get status? We get status by showing people we care about them. And we can show we care about them in a variety of different ways. You can care about somebody by being honest or sincere or helpful, but you can also show by managing their feelings, right? And not making them feel bad. And so this idea of I've one-upped you in any way, humility is a way of saying, I care about you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad about who you are by saying that I am better. And so I believe that when people, and this is certainly true for me, when you conceal something like this, you are doing it because you are trying to excel on the dimension of warmth. I want you to like me, and I want you to understand that I truly do care about your feelings. So it comes from a very good and well-intentioned place normally when people are humble about these things. However, the science about what happens when we conceal our accomplishments is the exact opposite of what we intend. We've done it to preserve the relationship. We've done it for our warmth. But this brilliant research that I talk about in the book on concealing accomplishments shows that this is not what happens. So let's say, you and I are chatting. We're chatting about all of the things, but then there's something I don't tell you that is clearly an accolade of mine. And, maybe something recent that just happened. And we hang up the next day or whatever. You find out this thing. So here's the question. What is going through your mind when you realize Alison had this great success and Alison didn't tell me? Is what goes through your mind, what a humble person Alison is. No, that's what the research shows. That's not what goes through people's minds. So we do this to get credit for humility, but we don't even get the credit. What goes through people's minds is, why didn't she tell me? And the two stories that people come up with are either, I'm not that close a friend or a confidant that she feels like I get let into these things. So therefore it drives a wedge, but you don't see me as warm. We don't have a close relationship. Or the paternalistic motive, which is, she didn't think I could handle it, right? She thinks I'm either such a loser or so pathetic or I'm so envious. I don't have the capacity to be happy for her. She didn't think enough of me to think I could receive this well. And that's not flattering for warmth either. So one of the things I really do try to do in my life as best I can is I really try to be informed by the science of my field and to say, okay, Alison, the evidence has spoken. Your humility in these situations is not working for you. It's not establishing your credibility, but nor is it making you seem likable when you're doing all these dances to avoid having to tell people things that you could otherwise just bring into conversation. And so that's partly how I've evolved. It's a much better strategy. They've found it's more relationship building to talk about the good things that happen to you. It builds your credibility and people like to celebrate with you. The art of doing it, I think, is doing it in a way that still can create a warmth. Like, I'm really excited about this really great thing that happened, or I'm excited and this would have never happened without the great work of so-and-so who was really helping me behind the scenes. And I owe a lot of credit to them. That's called dual promotion. And that's really good when you take credit and you also share some of it with someone else, of a way of showing up as really capable and warm. So again, as new science comes out and we learn it and we realize, look, people aren't idiots. Being humble is not a totally misguided strategy. It's trying to build warmth. The problem is that some of the ways we do it end up actually killing our warmth rather than fostering it.
That's so interesting. I love that research. And I'm so glad that you revealed it in your book. And yet there seems like there is an element to someone. I work with very successful people in Silicon Valley, and they will tell me at times, this awesome thing happened, and I can't share it with a particular friend because they do not cheer me on. Now, why this friendship is being maintained is another question. But maybe this friend has been around pretty much all their lives, and they know they can't share this because the friend will feel diminished. And I find that conundrum a little bit baffling. I love the idea of sharing good news, and I think we should do it more often. And I have been on the other side of that and thought to myself, why did he or she not tell me this amazing thing? I would have been so stoked. I might have a moment of just a little bit of like, wow, I wish I had that too. But I'm able to dial it back and find my north and say, this is so cool for this person. And yet I also know of these other examples of people who could be a family member even. I can't share this with a particular cousin or a sibling or something. I hear about this not infrequently in my office.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering a little bit about how you would weigh in if you were the Cyrano de Bergerac whispering in my ear during a session. What might you say?
Yeah, so I get a similar story told to me from a slightly different, because we're the same work but different. Oftentimes I get I'm a woman at work and the other women compete with me and I'm not trying to compete with them. Why do they see me as their competition? Because I don't see them as my competition. And I'd say, look, there's a paper in psychology. It'll tell you all you need to know. The title of the paper is called When the Boss Feels Inadequate. And it turns out insecurity is just a really, really ugly quality. It manifests itself in really bad behavior. And particularly when people are powerful and insecure, then it's terrible. But the same story is true in both cases. If the person is insecure about, what are they insecure about? Their own status. They do not feel highly respected. If they're insecure about that, then they often will end up competing for status with other people. And that's true whether it's a friend you can't tell or a close confidant you can't tell, or if it's an office coworker who's competing. They're competing because they're insecure about their own status. And I tell people that the solution to that is not something anybody wants to hear, but it's accurate based on the science, is you have to lean in rather than lean out. Because here's what ends up happening. In your case, something good happens. I can't tell it to my friend because my friend is insecure. I know it's going to make them feel terrible. So now I start hiding things from them. But now they find out about them through other people. Eventually, they're going to feel worse. Not only did the good thing now happen, and you didn't tell me, which only makes me more insecure that you're not really my friend, and et cetera. And the whole thing cycles. And so I always tell people, you have to lean in. You can't lean out. The way that you deal with someone's insecurity, whether it's a colleague or a friend, is you have to make them feel secure. And the way you make them feel secure is you have to build their status. So you have to do it in ways that are authentic. You can't build someone's status by lying about something they're not, but to show them that they have status in your eyes, to go to them for advice on things where they could really advise you, to talk them up to other people. When you introduce them, I don't even ever have a friend who when they introduces you, they make you feel like you've won an Academy Award and you're like,
totally.
when someone does that for you, they build your status and you're like, I feel good now and I feel good around you. And so I always tell people, if someone has been the petty person, the insecure person, behavior in human interactions reciprocated. So we start getting petty and it only fuels the insecurity. I was right to not trust you. I was right to think that you think you're better than me. When we lean in and we say, I need to build this person's status. This person needs to understand how respected they are by me. And I would start with, find the one thing, even if they've treated you terribly, the one thing that you do really respect about them, that you do really value, where you can talk them up to them, about them, and do it. Because as they start to realize that they have status in your eyes, that is what is going to make them show up better in this relationship. And we often want them to start first. Like, well, no, you're the one that has the problem. You stop being insecure with me and I'll act better. I'm like, no, you can control your own behavior better than someone else's. So I see this a lot with why women aren't supporting women. And I'm like, look, we've made women feel insecure about their status and power since the dawn of time. And then we're mad at them when they can't show up more gracious to other people because we're basically asking starving people to share their crumbs. And then we're like, you're a bitch for not sharing. So it's the same idea is if people feel well fed, their status is supported, then they are always going to be the people who love to lift other people up. And that's, I think, why you'd say, like, why don't I feel that way? It's because I generally feel like I am well respected and well regarded. And that gives me the grace to be able to then share that back with other people.
Amazing. You are a professor of negotiation, and negotiation may be one of the most important skills of all time. And especially so for women, I would say, because of everything we're talking about. What are some of your best tips for negotiation, and why is negotiation so important?
The way I always teach negotiation is it's not a deal-making toolkit, it's a relationship management toolkit. Every relationship has give and take. You have goals you want to achieve. And whether that's just where do we go to dinner tonight, or how does the project get done, or do we work together or not? I have goals and I can't achieve those goals without your willing cooperation. And that's what the negotiation is about, is how do I get you to voluntarily agree to do the things I want and vice versa. So good negotiation skills are the skills through which we navigate our human world, our relationships, not just sign contracts and buy and sell things. And so it's a skill everyone utilizes. It's a skill everyone needs. And that's how I teach it. It'll help you in any relationship you have, you manage those better. And I think about this a lot, like as a parent, I have 3 kids and my dad who's been sick is now living with us. And so I'm now both parenting and also being reminded on a daily up close basis what it was like to be a child, and all the things are coming together. But there's no doubt that I was raised in this generation of parents, like, you do what I say because I told you to. There is no negotiation. Negotiation would be weakness because it would be backing down from the thing I just told you to do. Whereas I go with my kids, almost everything's negotiable. So here's how it's going to work. First, it has to be mutually beneficial, which means you need to understand what I really care about, and I need to understand what you really care about, because I cannot move you until I give you something in this that you see as a win, and you can't move me. And so I think that's one tip I have for people is always be thinking about the what's in it for me question for the person you're talking to. Like, how do they see this as a win? And the really successful negotiators are ones that don't bully people into saying yes. They're the ones that entice people to say yes because they've been able to frame their offering in a way that the person says, I see this as a win for me. And to teach people how to do that. I do that a lot with my kids, and they've gotten better at it. Like, they will come to me and be like, can I have the iPad? And I would say to them, like, what's in it for me? I don't get anything out of that. And then they'd be like, no, we promise we'll put it away when you tell us to. I said, yeah, but if I never give it to you, then that promise is automatically going to happen. I don't even have to worry about it. So that's not doing anything for me. But then over years, I'm like, come back to me with an argument that meets my needs. And they're like, what? Meets your needs? And darn it if they haven't gotten better at it over years of doing this. So now they're smart. Now they come back and they say, we want to buy this video game and we're going to play it together, because they've figured out, what does mom want? Mom wants siblings who love each other and play together and have good times together. So if they come and say, we're going to have brother-sister time with this, mom is more likely to say yes. And I'm like, you know what? You should get paid off for that, because that's exactly right. You have figured out your audience. You have figured out what your audience valued, and you came up with an argument that met your audience's needs. So that's one thing I would think about. The other one, which I think kids do brilliantly, is you got to move first with an ambitious ask. Kids ask for the moon. How about a pony? My daughter's been on it for a puppy for years. And even if they don't get the thing, by the time, you concede and drop down, they're still getting a lot more than they should. Why? Because they asked for the moon. So we have to be able to justify it. But moving first in our interactions, asking for what we want, asking for more than we need, but would still love to have, another great thing. And then the third one I'll offer is giving people choices. And this is another thing you see in parenting that can be put into the adult world, which is I'm going to give you 3 choices is something that at least today's world, every parent has said. But when you do that, what are you trying to do, right? You're trying to convey to another human being, I care about you. I want you to have some say. I'm not trying to force my will on you. But 3 choices are never like, would you like to go to Disneyland? Would you like a pony? Or would you like $1 million? It's like, would you like to eat your vegetables before you take your bath? Would you like to do your homework now or in an hour? The choices are constrained so that no matter what someone picks, your needs are still being met. And that's a tactic that we can use in negotiating a deal. It's a tactic you can use in a personal relationship to say, let me tell you what I want. And here's 3 different ways that we can make that happen. And that's a tool that has a lot of value. And we see in the science, when you use that, let me give you 3 choices. People think that you're more caring because you care about the relationship, but you also still are able to claim what you need and get what you need out of it.
I love that so much. And I remember reading, I believe it was Stuart Diamond's book, Get More, I believe out of University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. And he said that negotiation is not some form of manipulation, some Machiavellian trick, some Jedi mind trick either, in that if everyone had the same playbooks, we'd actually have better relationships overall. And you were saying that directly and you're nodding.
100%. I always tell people, people think a skilled negotiator is going to be to their detriment. Right. And I'm like, have you ever tried to negotiate with a 2-year-old? An unskilled negotiator is impossible to deal with. And there are many adult 2-year-olds in this world. Okay. That's your space more than mine. But there are many large 2-year-olds who negotiate poorly with poor strategy. They can't be convinced otherwise. Skilled people, it's just like when people play poker. My son will never fold a hand. He's impossible to play against because it doesn't matter what he has. He's playing the thing. So 50% of the time you'll win, 50% of the time you won't. Poker players would much rather play against a skilled player because all the rules of the game are the same and we know what we're doing. And yes, if everybody had the same playbook, if we could level up everyone's skills, it would be a better game. It's a more enjoyable game for everybody. It's no fun to negotiate or play poker with a 2-year-old.
And I would say the same thing about a podcast interview. It's no fun to interview somebody who isn't articulate and not interesting. Same thing. And you talk about Annie Duke in your book, and she's a former guest on the podcast and wonderful. Oh gosh,
right? The best human.
Just amazeballs. Thinking in Bets is such a game-changing book. And all of her thoughts and ideas around this and how poker relates to life. And you talk quite a bit about this in the book, and we're not going to get into this, but this is just all the more reason why everybody needs to buy this book. I don't care about your gender, but especially if you are identified as female, you gotta have this book. Not only is it well titled, but you actually embody likable badassedness. I'm sure people have said this to you before, but I'm gonna say it anyway. You are a likable badass. From the second we started talking,
Thank you.
Like, you tickle my brain and you just make me want to say, yes, I agree, because you have so much power. I'm going to ask you, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
No, you're amazing.
Oh.
I could talk to you for days. This is such a beautiful part of this process that you get to people come into your life that you wouldn't otherwise be talking to. And I always think it makes me want to write 1 million books so I can get invited back 1 million times.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Well, actually, I may need to have you back for just another talk on negotiation.
Done.
Because it's like
Name the
fantastic.
Time. Anytime.
So Alison, if you had the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one skill or insight that would dramatically improve the lives of individuals and perhaps, since we're all connected, society at large, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would impact the individual and perhaps society?
Okay. That is a hard question that could be answered in many ways, but I'm going to give you one that I very much stand by. And that is talk other people up. So if human beings could do only one thing, and I would say this because it's both a beautiful way to live. One of the rules that I try to live by is anytime I have a thought in my head about something positive about another person, I try not to let it die in my head. I try to put it out there in the world, either to them, to compliment them, to build the relationship and let them build their status and let them know I think they're amazing, or to somebody else and say, oh my God, this person's amazing. And the reason I use that as the one thing here for this question is because when we do that, we actually are doing 2 things at once, right? We're building a better world that we all want to live in, where we're all building each other up, but also relationships run on reciprocity. And so if the only thing you ever did was to build other people's status, guess what? They will be tripping over themselves to build yours. And so it's not only a great way to live, it's a behavior that's also highly strategic for you getting the thing that you also need, right? You need the respect too. And so when we build other people's respect, they can't wait to go and tell other people how amazing we are. So I thought if you could only do one thing, and if anything of all the advice I put out there, people did that, they would not only be helping other people, they would also be helping themselves.
Absolutely fantastic. And Bill and Ted and their excellent adventure talked about being excellent to each other. And that is at the heart of being excellent to each other. Adam Grant, your buddy, talks a lot about how givers gain, and those are his words, but generosity wins.
Yes.
And even game theory reflects this. So Machiavelli, go take a nap for a couple millennia. You suck. I'm definitely all down with what you have to say. I'm so delighted we met. Just a side note to the listener, within 2 days, 2 different people said, you've got to interview Alison Fragale. And boy, I am so happy to have met you.
The feeling is mutual. Likewise.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.